Hi guys, and welcome back to part 2, the treaty. I lit a fire whilst gathering more wood. I lit it the ancient way, rubbing 2 sticks together on top of each other, and dry bark and some dry grass. And I then blew it until a flame was born and burning bright. It lit the whole forest as it became warm, and I felt comfortable and relaxed. I reached into my holder and pulled out some fresh uncooked meat, which I caught and prepared earlier today for this exact occasion. I made a hanger for the pieces of meat out of dry twigs and strips of vine, but I asked the forest for permission first, as it all belonged to them. The meat was cooked just right and tasted real good. I used the knife my father gave me as a gift, which was made out of animal bone and skin. I slowly used it to cut through the meat, but when I had finished my delicious meal, I unpacked my sleeping gear and fell deeply to sleep. I awoke by this deep guttural growl and howling sound, coming from a fair way away, but not too far. I sniffed the fresh night's air and caught the scent of it, but it was a smell I didn't recognize. Like I said, I didn't recognize the scent, but I've a good idea for who it was perhaps, and I pray to the spirits that I hope I was wrong. My people, my pack, have this belief that we would only attack and kill one of our own, or another werewolf, if they killed one of our own, without reason or mercy. We have always lived by that belief. It has never been broken. When I got back to the Kaiju camp, I spoke to their chief. I told him that there may be a rogue wolf closing quickly towards his territory and is moving fast, and that it will be here soon, within the next few hours. So at least I gave him a head start. But what I didn't tell him was that I think the lone wolf may have been the one who slaughtered his daughter. That was my job totally, to make him pay for what he did, and pay dearly he will. I shook the chief's hand, turned and walked away. Suddenly the chief spoke. As I turned back, he said, "Justice is the only way." On that note, I knew what to do. Deep down, I knew he knew that this rogue wolf slaughtered his only daughter. But he was man and beast. And I am much more than that. So it was my job to get the job done and hopefully move on. I eventually came across a stream embedded with rock and small stones, surrounded by tall trees and levels of verge and long grass. The skies was beautiful and bright, but I knew darkness would soon follow, so I had to find somewhere to set up camp, and quickly, because now it started to rain. If the loose wood got wet, I wouldn't be able to ignite a fire with it, so time was of the essence. I walked through the sandy, mudded rivers to the other side, onto mud, sand and stone again, and walked over to the forest line and into the trees. I couldn't hear a single creature, not one, let alone see anything. Suddenly I heard a guttural low growl again. This time it was much closer. My wolf instincts. No, it wasn't a bear, or any other animal. I know exactly what it was. It was him again, the rogue wolf. And this time I will make him pay. The heavy footsteps got closer and closer to where I was, setting up camp. I could smell it, hear it, feel it, like it was right next to me. My instincts were over 100% now. I was mixed with anger and revenge. This thing took something from my life and left me with nothing. They left her family without a daughter, and myself alone in my life without her. Suddenly I was violently grabbed by my head and slammed to the ground, only after I was thrown hard against a large tree. Suddenly there was a rushing sound mixed with concerned voices. The voices I recognized. It was Chief's and my father's. They came out into the small opening and saw the rogue wolf hanging over my almost motionless body. I got to my knees and nodded to them both, and they understood that this was my fight, not theirs. Suddenly the wolf spoke. It said unknowingly that Eriton's father was present within the small clearing. It said, with a guttural voice, "I'm not sorry for murderously slaughtering your girlfriend. I enjoyed every moment of it, tearing her limb from limb, ripping her insides out and slowly devouring her soft, warm, virgin, succulent flesh. I shouted at it, 'You will pay, and on this day you will die, and it will not be a merciful death, or painless, and it will be by my hands only.' My body was violently changing, twisting, snapping, stretching, breaking, in some parts bleeding. My ears stretched into points at the ends, my hands lengthened, and talons grew in place of my nails. My vision enhanced. In fact, so did all my instincts. Suddenly, my transformation was complete, and I slowly stood on 2 legs, and reached a height of 8 feet, and I was huge with it too. I was bigger than the other wolf. The rogue wolf could not stand on 2 feet like I could, because I was born on the red full moon. He rushed at me with angry and violence in his eyes, which were golden yellow, his teeth large and glistening in the moonlight, drooled by slashing, glistening saliva from his open jaws, as his eyes narrowed, looking and concentrating only on me. As our bodies collided with a thundering clash of hair and putrid wet drool, I grabbed him by the back of its head and threw him hard against a nearby tree. Once he got to his feet finally, I charged towards him, picked him up, from his waist and slammed him to the wet, muddy, rocky ground, then turned and started to walk away. Suddenly, I heard my father shout, "Look out, son!" And as I turned, the rogue wolf went to give me the final blow. At that moment, there was a loud, thundering bang from Chief's rifle. The bullet penetrated through the wolf's shoulder. Then came another shot. This bullet exploded through the wolf's leg out the other side. Blood and bone and flesh splashed everywhere, including over me, which sent me into a violent frenzy. I heavily took a couple of steps forward towards the rogue wolf, stood behind him, grabbed its head, and shouted in my wolf's voice, "This is for you, Erotan, and your father, and the rest of your family, and your tribe, and for me." I gave out a thundering, ballistic, heavy, guttural growl, pulled at the wolf's head, which was clasped between my taloned, wolf-like hands, and violently ripped his head clean off, and its body sagged to the forest floor, spasming and shaking. And then nothing. I threw the head next to the now lifeless body of a man. Anyway, I started walking towards everyone who was watching and spoke to my father and Chief. The Chief looked at me and nodded his head as my body started to change back into a man. I knew that it was his way of saying thank you. He then reached out with his hand and gave me a necklace that belonged to Erotan's grandmother, passed down to her. I placed it around my neck and nodded back at him and smiled. Then I slowly walked over to my father, who grabbed me and put his arms around me and wouldn't let me go. Suddenly, the Chief shouted out, "The treaty has now begun."